Millionaire sees his ex-girlfriend, waiting for the bus with 3 boys who look just like him. Igor Materazzi wasn't the kind of man who stopped in traffic to look at the sidewalk. As the CEO of one of the largest logistics holdings in Latin America, he lived life in fast-forward, meetings, helicopters, mansions, bank accounts filled with zeros. But that cloudy late afternoon, something made him slam on the brakes. There, at the bus stop in front of an old bakery, stood Maria. The Maria, her hair tied up hastily, her expression tired, and next to her, 3 boys. 3. Same age range, same skin tone, same mouth, same stare as his. Igor's heart froze. It couldn't be. He sat motionless behind the wheel, the sound of the blinker clicking like a siren inside his head. The car behind him honked, but he didn't hear it. All he could hear was his own breathing growing heavier. Legs shaking, he got out of the car. The world moved in slow motion. Each step toward the sidewalk felt like free falling into the unknown. "Maria?" he said, his voice cracking. She turned slowly. Her stare burned, not with anger, but with an old, deep, uncontrollable hurt. The 3 boys looked at him simultaneously. 3 pairs of brown eyes, identical to Igor's, stared at him in silence. One held a chewed-up toy. Another clutched a folded notebook. The third rocked back and forth, eyes fixed on the ground. "Are they mine?" he stammered. Maria took a deep breath. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. That was worse. She just stood there, staring at him, while a thunderclap split the sky. Suddenly the rain began pouring down. Thick drops fell like arrows. One of the boys curled up and covered his ears. Maria quickly crouched down, hugging him, shielding him with her own body. Igor knelt beside them instinctively. Both were drenched, unsure of what to say. The boy trembled. His name was Enzo, as Igor would later learn. One of the 3, the one who needed silence, routine, and double the love. A bus sped past, splashing water onto everyone nearby. An old man muttered, "That's him, Materazzi. And those kids. They're spitting images." Igor felt the weight of the world crush his shoulders. How had he let this happen? How hadn't he known? "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked, almost whispering. Maria hesitated. A lightning bolt lit up the sky. She answered with another question. "Would you have stayed?" The silence that followed was deafening. YouTube disclaimer section follows. Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you a quick heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without warning. Take a second to check that red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content coming your way. And while you're at it, smash that like button. It really helps me with the algorithm. Oh, and let me know in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your engagement makes all the difference. Let's connect. Back to the story. The silence between them felt so heavy it was suffocating. Igor, still kneeling, his clothes drenched, felt his chest burning. Maria trembled. The boys watched him as if he were a stranger who had just stepped out of a TV screen. Suddenly Maria's phone vibrated loudly. She looked at the screen and immediately went pale. "No," she murmured, almost voiceless. Igor frowned. "What is it?" Before she could answer, the phone slipped from her hand and fell into a nearby puddle. A number still flashed on the cracked screen. Unknown number, 13 missed calls. Maria's gaze turned vacant. Her hands trembled as she pulled the boys close with urgency. "We need to get out of here, now," she nearly shouted. Igor stood, confused. "What do you mean? Who's calling you?" She hesitated, glancing around as if she were being watched, then dragged the boys toward the nearest alley. Igor ran after them. "Maria, tell me what's going on," he insisted, grabbing her arm. She spun around abruptly. "It's Rodrigo," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. Igor froze. "Rodrigo? What? He's the man you fired from the company 5 years ago. He's their stepfather, and he's threatening me." Igor's face turned pale as memories of Rodrigo exploded in his mind. Rodrigo, the former operations director, fired for embezzlement. An unstable, obsessive man who had sworn revenge. Since when? Since you disappeared from my life, she fired back, her voice breaking. Before Igor could respond, a black car screeched to a halt at the corner. Its doors swung open. Two men got out. Hoodies, dark glasses, even in the rain. They moved toward them with purpose. "Run!" Maria screamed. Igor instinctively grabbed the three boys as best as he could. He felt the weight, the desperation, the fear tearing at his chest. People on the street started shouting. An old lady pointed. "They're trying to take the kids." Igor ran with the boys in his arms, stumbling along the wet sidewalk. Maria ran beside him, pulling one of the boys by the hand. Heavy footsteps pounded behind them. Screeching tires, shouts, a distant siren. As Igor turned the corner, he thought he had managed to lose them, until he felt the cold barrel of a gun press against the back of his neck. "Make a move, and they'll pay." The voice behind him was cold, low, and terrifyingly familiar. Igor froze. A chill ran down his spine. He recognized that voice. It wasn't Rodrigo. It was his father's voice. Standing still, Igor felt the icy touch of the gun against his neck, making every muscle in his body lock up. His pounding heart felt like it was about to burst out of his throat. "Dad?" The word escaped raw, as if tearing from inside. The breathing behind him was heavy, almost gasping. Slowly, Igor turned his head, just enough to see the impossible. There stood Roberto Materazzi, older, unshaven, hollow-eyed, dressed in dark clothes. But it was him, alive, after 7 years missing, officially declared dead. "This isn't a good place to talk, son." His voice was low but full of contained rage. Igor tried to process what he was seeing. The world spun. Roberto, the father he had mourned at the funeral, buried, now standing there with a gun pointed at him. Maria screamed behind him. "What's happening?" "Stay where you are," Roberto roared. The boys froze, terrified. Igor took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling uncontrollably. You faked your own death?" he asked, eyes wide in disbelief. Roberto gave a crooked smile. "I had no choice. And guess whose fault that is? Yours." Before Igor could react, one of the hooded men ran back, panting. "Sir, the police are coming," Roberto growled. "Damn it. Change of plans." In one swift motion, he yanked Igor by the collar and pressed the gun directly to his head. "Follow me, unless you want this to end right here," he whispered, his tone chilling Igor to the bone. Maria started running with the boys, but Roberto shouted, "If she takes another step, I shoot." She froze. Tears were already streaming down her face. The children cried. An old, rusty car with its back door open appeared at the corner. Roberto dragged Igor toward it, shoving his son inside with brutal force. The stench of gasoline and rust filled Igor's nose. Before getting in, Roberto turned to Maria. "You know where to find me, if you want him alive," he said, pointing at Igor. The car sped off. Maria stood frozen in the rain, clutching the three boys, in shock. Inside the car, Igor trembled. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Roberto stared at him through the rearview mirror, his eyes filled with hatred and madness. "You stole everything from me, the company, my life, and now you want my grandsons?" Igor blinked, confused. "Grandsons?" His father's smile twisted with cold venom. "You really think those boys are yours?" The silence in the car was razor sharp. Only the sound of the engine and Igor's ragged breathing filled the space. Roberto's glare, fixed in the mirror, seemed to pierce right through his son's soul. "What do you mean, grandsons?" Igor repeated, his throat dry. Roberto let out a short, bitter, poisoned laugh. "You honestly think she just waited around for you all these years?" He pressed the gas pedal harder, the car jolting forward. "You know nothing, Igor. You never did." Igor struggled to breathe, his heart pounding. Every word felt like a punch. "What did you do to her?" he asked. "Me?" Roberto scoffed. "I just took care of what you abandoned." The car turned onto a deserted street lined with abandoned buildings. It stopped in front of a warehouse with a rusty gate. One of the henchmen jumped out to open it. Inside, the air smelled of mold, burnt oil, and scrap metal. Roberto got out first, pointing the gun at Igor. "Move," he ordered. Igor obeyed, his legs shaky. In the darkest corner of the warehouse, someone was tied to a chair, head down, body motionless. A shiver ran down Igor's spine. "Who is that?" he asked, voice trembling. Roberto walked over to the figure and yanked their head up. The shock hit instantly. "Rodrigo?" Igor shouted, stumbling backward. Yes, it was Rodrigo. Bruised face, eyes nearly swollen shut, split lip, dried blood at the corner of his mouth. He's here?" Igor was stunned. Roberto smiled again. "Yeah, the model stepfather. So worried about Maria. So eager to mess up my plans." Igor held his head in his hands. "I don't understand any of this. You disappeared, faked your death. Now you're kidnapping us. And Rodrigo is here too. What do you want?" Roberto took a deep breath, as if fighting to keep himself from exploding. "I want what's mine. The company, the family, the power." He paused dramatically. "And most of all, the boys." Igor's eyes widened. They're my kids," he yelled. Roberto stepped closer, eyes blazing. "No, Igor, they're my kids." The world stopped. Igor lost his footing, the air, his strength. "What?" he whispered, barely able to speak. Roberto smiled, victorious. "Maria, she never told you, because they were never yours. She was mine before she was yours. Always was." Igor's mind spun. Dizziness, nausea. Before he could react, he heard the dry click of a gun being cocked right behind his head. This time, it was Maria's voice. "Enough," she said, cold and determined. The click of Maria's gun echoed through the warehouse like thunder. Igor froze. Roberto slowly turned, surprised, eyes wide. "Maria." He tried to smile, but the tension in the air felt like a wire about to snap. "Put that gun down." "Now," she said, her voice firm, almost hoarse. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were different, cold, determined. Igor didn't know what to think. The woman he loved, now pointing a gun at his own father, or ex-father-in-law? He no longer knew anything for sure. Roberto took a step forward. "You don't have the guts." The shot came before he could finish the sentence. A dry, sharp blast. The bullet grazed Roberto's ear and struck the ceiling, scattering dust and bits of plaster. "I said, drop the gun," she screamed. Roberto froze. For the first time, he seemed genuinely afraid. Still on the floor, Igor stared at Maria as if seeing a stranger. Who was this woman? Suddenly, Rodrigo, bloody and battered, started laughing, a hoarse, pain-filled laugh. "I knew it. I knew this would all blow up sooner or later." He spat blood onto the floor. "Tell him, Maria. Tell him now." Maria kept the gun aimed but took a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a second, and when she opened them again, she seemed to have aged years in that moment. "I've been working with your father this whole time, Igor." The ground seemed to vanish beneath him. What?" "Since the day he died." She continued, her voice breaking. "I knew he was alive. I helped hide him. I was part of everything. Even the fall of your company." Igor's world spun. "No, you're lying," he stammered. Maria looked straight into his eyes. "The boys. They're part of a project, a genetic experiment, a lie, a DNA manipulation." She bit her lip, fighting back tears. "None of them is your child, Igor." The air left his lungs. Darkness clouded his vision. A ringing filled his ears. Before he could react, the sound of approaching sirens grew louder. Red lights began to flicker against the warehouse walls. And then, the last thing he saw before everything went black was Maria dropping the gun to the floor, running towards one of the henchmen, as if she were fleeing, but not from Roberto, from him. Igor opened his eyes slowly. His head throbbed like it had been smashed from the inside. The air smelled of dust, rust, and blood. As he tried to move, he realized his wrists were tied behind his back. The ropes dug into his skin. The warehouse was now silent. Only the fading wail of distant sirens lingered in the air. "Maria?" he tried to call, his throat raw. No answer. The cold concrete pressed against his face. He managed to turn his neck slightly. And then he saw her. Maria, sitting in a corner, hugging her knees, crying silently. Her hands shook, but her gaze was fixed on nothing, as if she were somewhere else entirely. Igor tried to speak again, but before he could, he heard footsteps approaching. Heavy, dragging. Roberto, his father, stood right in front of him, holding a syringe. The liquid inside glowed amber, almost fluorescent. "Do you know what this is?" Roberto lifted the syringe like a trophy. "The result of years of research, years of betrayal, years of investments you destroyed." Igor's eyes widened. "What are you going to do?" Roberto knelt beside him. "You're going to help me, whether you like it or not." Before Igor could grasp what that meant, he felt the needle pierce his neck. The liquid burned inside like fire. Igor screamed. His entire body tingled. His veins felt like they were on fire. Cold sweat poured from him as his vision darkened again. Maria rushed toward him, desperate. "What did you do to him?" She shoved Roberto hard, but he slapped her violently, throwing her against the wall. On the floor, Igor still had just enough consciousness to hear one final sentence. "When he wakes up, he won't remember anything. Not you, not the kids, not even who he is." The words echoed in his mind, until everything went black. The darkness felt endless. Igor's head throbbed as if being crushed from the inside. Suddenly a flash of light, the sound of something metallic scraping across the floor. He gasped awake, eyes flying open. He lay on an iron bed, thick straps binding his wrists and ankles. The ceiling above was cracked cement. A single hanging bulb swayed, casting twisted shadows across the walls. Beside the bed, Maria, but different. Wearing a white lab coat, hair pulled into a tight bun, a surgical mask dangling from her neck. "Good morning, Mr. Materazzi," she said in a clinical, cold tone, almost robotic. Igor blinked, confused. "Maria, where am I?" She stepped closer, checked his pulse like a nurse doing a routine exam. "You're safe, but you'll need to cooperate." He tried to pull at the straps, but they held him tight. "Cooperate with what?" His voice came out hoarse. Maria sighed, picked up a clipboard and started jotting something down. Test number 47. Initial response. Confusion, followed by attempted resistance, she murmured, almost as if he were just another lab experiment. This time, it was Maria's voice. "Enough," she said, cold and determined. The click of Maria's gun echoed through the warehouse like thunder. Igor froze. Roberto slowly turned, surprised, eyes wide. "Maria?" He tried to smile, but the tension in the air felt like a wire about to snap. "Put that gun down. Now," she said, her voice firm, almost hoarse. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were different, cold, determined. Igor didn't know what to think. The woman he loved, now pointing a gun at his own father, or ex-father-in-law. He wasn't sure of anything anymore. Roberto took a step forward. "You don't have the guts." The shot came before he could finish. A dry, sharp bang. The bullet grazed Roberto's ear and hit the ceiling, scattering dust and bits of plaster. "I said, drop the gun," she screamed. Roberto froze. For the first time, he actually looked scared. Still on the floor, Igor stared at Maria like she was someone else. Who was this woman? Suddenly, Rodrigo, bloody and beaten, started laughing. A hoarse, painful laugh. I knew this would blow up sooner or later." He spat blood onto the floor. "Tell him, Maria. Tell him now." Maria kept the gun aimed but took a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a second, and when she opened them, she seemed to have aged years in that instant. "I've been working with your father this whole time, Igor." The floor seemed to disappear beneath him. What? "Since the day he died," she continued, her voice cracking. "I knew he was alive. I helped hide him. I was part of everything. Even the fall of your company." Igor's world spun. "No, you're lying," he stammered. Maria looked straight into his eyes. "The boys, they're part of a project, a genetic experiment, a lie, DNA manipulation." She bit her lip, fighting back tears. "None of them is your son, Igor." The air left his lungs. Darkness clouded his vision. A ringing filled his ears. Before he could react, he heard the approaching sirens growing louder. Red lights flickered against the warehouse walls. And then, the last thing he saw before everything went dark, was Maria dropping the gun to the floor, running toward one of the henchmen, as if fleeing, but not from Roberto. From him. When Igor woke again, something was different. The cracked concrete ceiling was gone. The smell of rust, gone. He opened his eyes and found himself in a white room with smooth walls. Everything clean, minimalist, no dirt, cold light from recessed lamps, like waking inside a futuristic lab. He tried to move and realized he wasn't tied anymore. The restraints were gone. He lay on a comfortable bed, white sheets, soft pillow. Looking to the side, there was a tray with breakfast, juice, fruit, bread, coffee. His heart raced. It all felt wrong. Too good to be true. He sat up with difficulty. His body still ached, but the marks from before were gone. He looked at his wrists. Clean skin, no rope burns. "Good morning, Mr. Materazzi," said a female voice from a speaker on the wall. He turned his head, confused. "Who's there?" he shouted. "Relax," the voice continued. Soft, sweet, almost hypnotic. "Everything's under control." "Maria?" he yelled. "Is that you?" Silence. Suddenly, the door opened automatically with a hiss. A man entered. But it wasn't Roberto. It was himself. Igor froze. His own face, but with shorter hair, a cold stare, flawless business attire, and a badge on his chest that read, Dr. H. Materazzi, Director of Project Regression. His world stopped. "Love you." "What?" Igor stammered, throat dry. The other Igor smiled, a slow, controlled half-smile. "I told you," the other said. "You don't know anything." Igor tried to stand, but his legs gave out. "This is a nightmare." He trembled. "It has to be a nightmare." The other Igor walked over, crouched beside him, and whispered in his ear, "It's not. You're part of this. You always were." Suddenly, the walls around him began to shift, like digital screens changing scenes. The white room vanished. Now, he saw images, memories, moments of himself, wearing that same lab coat, injecting that same substance into other people, including Maria. Igor screamed. The other Igor just laughed, and before leaving through the automatic door, he turned back and said, "Welcome back to your real job." The door closed, and Igor could only scream until he lost his voice. He screamed until his throat tore. His head throbbed. His chest felt like it would explode. He tried to breathe, but it felt like the air wouldn't come. The room around him kept shifting. Images of himself torturing people, injecting substances, laughing. He wanted to vomit. Suddenly, everything went black. Complete silence. When he opened his eyes again, he was standing in the middle of a gigantic room. No ceiling, no doors, just a white floor, stretching endlessly. Where am I?" he whispered. A laugh echoed, high-pitched, feminine, coming from all directions at once. "You finally woke up, my love." Igor froze. That voice. It wasn't Maria. It wasn't anyone he remembered. A figure began to appear in front of him, like a shadow materializing. Slowly, the face became clear. It was his own mother. "Mom," Igor stumbled backward. This is impossible. You died when I was 10. She smiled. A cold, strange, terrifying smile. "I never died, son." She walked slowly toward him. "Everything they told you was a lie. Until now." Igor tried to run, but his legs wouldn't move. She stopped just inches from him. Her eyes locked onto his, unblinking. "You know this project? The so-called regression project?" She let out a low laugh. "I was the one who created it." His world spun. His hands trembled. "No, that's not possible." He shook his head forcefully, denying it. "I recruited your father, manipulated Maria, used Rodrigo as bait." She stepped closer, whispering in his ear. "And you're just another test. A defective prototype." Her words hit him like punches to the head. "But why?" She stepped back, opening her arms as if making a grand announcement. "Because you, Igor, never really existed." The ground beneath his feet trembled. The walls of the room began to crack. Alarms started blaring in the distance. "What do you mean? I don't exist." She smiled with cruelty. "You're just a sequence of implanted memories, a failed experiment, and now it's time to shut you down." Before he could scream again, everything went black, and the sound of a single beep echoed into the void. Igor felt the floor vanish beneath him. Total darkness. No sound, no images, just a suffocating emptiness. Suddenly, a light. Small, blinking in the darkness. He strained his eyes, trying to understand. It was a digital display, with a countdown. 010, 09, 08. "No," he murmured, his voice faltering. He tried to move, heavy legs, numb body. But his mind now felt clearer, as if the shock had jolted everything back. "Wake up! Wake up!" he shouted at himself, struggling to stand. When the countdown hit 0, a blast, but not an explosion. It was a deep, hollow sound, like the air being sucked out of the room. The surrounding walls simply disappeared. He was back in the White Room, but this time, he wasn't alone. There were several other beds, lined up, with people lying in them, all with his face. Igor froze. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of other Igors, all breathing slowly, as if sedated. The floor shook. A siren blared. Automatic doors opened at one end of the room, revealing a hallway lit in red. And then, he saw it. Maria, running. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, Roberto. But worse, the lab coat Igor was with them too, holding one of the boys in his arms, unconscious. It was Enzo. "No!" Igor screamed, dragging himself out of bed. The other Igor glanced back over his shoulder and smiled. A cold smile, as if he knew Igor would never catch up. Maria hesitated, looked back, her eyes full of desperation, but for just a second, she smiled. A small, sad smile, like a silent apology. And then, she vanished with the two of them. Down the hallway, Igor tried to run after them, but before he could take a step, he heard his mother's voice echo again, from the loudspeaker above. "Red code initiated. All prototypes will be eliminated." Lights began flashing. The beds, one by one, started to go dark. The other, Igors, stopping their breathing, like burnt-out light bulbs. The air grew thicker. A metallic smell filled everything. Igor stumbled, heart pounding, body shaking, but with one burning certainty in his chest. He needed to find Maria, save Enzo, and finally discover who the hell he really was, or who they had made him believe he was. Before he could take another step, a side door opened, and there, standing, wearing the same black suit as always, was Rodrigo. with a time bomb strapped to his chest. "Hey, Igor," he said with a crooked smile and eyes full of rage. "Ready for the final phase?" And then, the countdown on his chest began. 0030, 0029, 028. Igor froze. The ticking from the bomb was deafening. His chest hurt, his eyes blurred with tears. He felt every second slipping away. Rodrigo approached slowly, his stare pure rage. "I'm ending this," he muttered. But then, something unexpected happened. A loud bang echoed behind them, and a blinding flash filled the room. A group stormed in. The three boys, but not like before. They stood strong, determined, united. Enzo in front, with that look in his eyes. The boy who once trembled, now steady. He ran straight toward Rodrigo. Rodrigo was caught off guard. The boy touched the bomb. Maria, appearing from behind, her face marked and worn, screamed, "No, let him go." Suddenly, Enzo touched the bomb, and it didn't explode. Time froze. Everyone stopped. The boy looked at Igor as if saying, "Now it's your turn." Igor felt a pull deep in his chest. The bomb dropped to the floor, unexploded. Rodrigo turned pale. "How?" Maria rushed to Igor, pulling him close. "They freed us." Her voice was barely a whisper, but full of strength. And then came the twist that brought everything crashing down. The lab coat Igor, the director of the project, appeared behind them, blood staining his coat. He plunged his hand into Rodrigo's chest, pulled out a tiny device. The real bomb had been inside him all along. "This was the real sacrifice," said the other Igor, his voice lethal. Rodrigo choked. You implanted this in me?" The director nodded. "You were the guardian. When Enzo touched it, the signal shifted to a new target. You saved them." He turned to Igor. "And you were never who you thought you were." Igor's body trembled. "What?" The director pressed something on Rodrigo's wrist. Rodrigo's body collapsed, hitting the floor. Maria fell into Igor's arms. The boys surrounded him. Igor felt the devastating truth. He might not even be human. And Maria might have been on the enemy's side all along. The questions clung to his throat. Who was he really? Who made them believe in this plan? A distant siren grew louder. The lab coat Igor turned, looking at the white room full of empty beds. "The protocol has been activated. You're contaminated." His cold laughter echoed. Igor held Maria as the children cried silently. Her eyes met his, a single tear running down her cheek. A knot of rage, fear, and something else tightened in his chest. Outside, the siren wailed. Lights flashed. And in the middle of the white room, lifeless bodies glowed under the cold light. Igor wiped his face. "What are we going to do?" Maria lifted her gaze. "We're going after answers. Together." But before they could take a step, the lights went out. The door locked itself. A new ticking began. And at that moment, Igor knew. Nothing would ever be the same again. He wasn't who he thought he was. And the real experiment was only just beginning. Igor's heart raced as the door locked on its own. The countdown restarted. The ticking echoed. His body trembled. Breathing became difficult. He felt the weight of Maria and the boys on his chest. He had to act. Suddenly, the door unlocked with a sharp click. The hallway glowed red. Maria appeared at the far end, Enzo in the arms of lab coat Igor, Roberto beside him, staggering, Rodrigo lying on the floor. "Igor, come on!" she shouted, never stopping. He ran, stomach tight. Every step felt like tearing skin. When he reached Maria, she turned, her eyes desperate. The boys covered in dust and dried blood. Their eyes locked on him. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered, her voice breaking. He wanted to hug everyone, but the tension was too thick. The hallway stretched long, with closed doors on both sides. The siren wailed louder. Suddenly, a cold voice cut through the hallway. "Delta protocol activated." Lights flickered red and blue. The siren now sounded like metallic screams. Maria froze, terror flashing in her eyes. What does that mean? Igor asked, his whole body shaking. She took a deep breath, turned to him. When we reach the end of this hallway, they'll choose who lives. Pure fear. His chest tore apart. They kept moving. Steady, determined steps. Until at the end of the corridor, a room opened. Inside, floor sockets. Hundreds of tangled cables. A panel with blinking lights. One for Maria, one for Igor, and a third. Experiment 048, active zone. Maria froze. The room pulsed with a risk that made Igor's head pound. It's the memory, she whispered. Whoever crosses that door will have all their memories rewritten. His body froze. Enzo squeezed his hand, confused. What? Igor gasped. All of us? She nodded. Everyone who enters comes out new. A deep chill ran through him. He trembled. Maria, I can't lose. He swallowed hard. I don't know who I am without you, without them. She looked at the panel, the lights flickering. Then, we have to go together. They exchanged a look, fear mixed with determination. He turned to the boys, each staring with eyes that begged, Dad, Mom. Igor took a deep breath. Come with me. Enzo ran and hugged his leg. Maria gave a sad smile and stepped into the room. Igor turned and followed her. As the door closed, they heard a snap. The light died. Silence, pure darkness. And then, the final twist. The door opened again. But it wasn't the corridor. It was the outside world. An open field, gray sky. Maria lay on the ground, unconscious. The boys were gone. And in their place stood Roberto, smiling. Glad you came, he said, grabbing Igor by the collar. But now, the real choice begins. And so, Igor fell into the unknown world. His memory, perhaps, no longer his own. Igor collapsed to his knees. The cold ground, ragged breath, body trembling as if it might fall apart at any second. Roberto approached slowly, the smile wide on his face. But something felt strange. His eyes were different. Deeper, more empty. Glad you came, Roberto repeated, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. Igor tried to speak, but his throat locked. He turned to the side and saw Maria unconscious, her face pale, hair sticking to her forehead, as if she too were trapped in an endless nightmare. Where are the boys? Igor managed to whisper. Roberto simply pointed behind him. Igor turned, and his blood ran cold. There, in the middle of the open field, they stood, but they were no longer children. 3 men, adults, short hair, broad shoulders, black tactical uniforms clinging to their bodies, stamped with the Regression Project symbol on their chests. 3, identical, with the same cold, empty expression, and their eyes fixed on him. No, no way. Igor stepped back, heart pounding. Roberto let out a dry, bitter laugh. They grew too fast, didn't they? He blinked as if amused by his son's despair. Welcome to the acceleration protocol. Igor's stomach twisted, his legs buckled. This is a lie. He tried to stand, but could barely manage. The 3 men began walking toward him. Synchronized steps. Unblinking, eyes locked on him. They don't remember you, Igor, said the voice behind him. Igor turned his neck with difficulty and nearly lost his breath. There, standing, was himself, the other Igor, but this time, with something on his face that shattered him. Half the skin was gone, an entire side of the face exposed wires, metallic plates, tiny gears spinning, a hybrid, half human, half machine. How? The other Igor walked up to him, stopping inches from his face. Because you, he said, tapping a finger against Igor's chest, are too. Igor froze. The world spun. No, he whispered, almost breathless. The other Igor gave a crooked smile. Why do you think you survived everything? The falls, the bullets, the experiments. He leaned in closer, his machine eyes glowing blue. Because you're the final prototype. Before Igor could scream, he felt the floor vanish. His entire body began to tingle, as if every cell was burning from the inside out. And for the first time, Igor heard, inside his own head, a metallic, cold voice that wasn't his. Activation initiated. Unit 01, ready to execute. He screamed. But the sound didn't come from his throat. It came from the speakers around him. His own scream still echoed when Igor felt his legs give out. His body felt out of control, as if every muscle obeyed a program he never asked for. Unit 001, ready to execute, the metallic voice inside his head repeated. He collapsed to his knees, hands trembling, heart racing. He looked around, searching for Maria, the boys, any sign of reality. But before he could move, something sliced through the air. A gunshot, dry, direct. Igor felt the impact in his chest. The world slowed to a crawl. He fell backward, gasping, eyes wide. Blood spilled, the pain unbearable, tearing everything apart. When he managed to focus, he saw where the shot had come from. Maria, standing, gun in hand, crying, but steady. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice broken. Igor tried to speak, but only blood came out. Gradually, everything darkened again. But this time, something felt different. The sensation wasn't of passing out, it was of waking up. Suddenly, a boom. The floor shook. The walls began to crack. A deafening siren flooded everything. And then, Igor opened his eyes, but not in the same place. He was in a small apartment. Simple. Ceiling fan, old curtains, an analog alarm clock buzzing next to the bed. His body, normal. No wounds. No scars. He sat up, panting, sweating. He looked around, and then came the shock. Maria was in the kitchen, very pregnant, and the three boys, still little, running around the living room playing with toy cars. "Good morning, love," she said, smiling as if nothing had happened. Igor froze. What?" His heart raced. He staggered to his feet, ran to the bathroom, looked in the mirror. His face was different too, younger, without a single mark from everything he'd lived through. "No, this can't be." He trembled. This isn't real." Maria appeared at the bathroom door. "Are you okay?" she asked, worried. "Another nightmare?" He looked at her, her gaze, clear, sincere, real. But before he could answer, the kitchen radio turned on by itself. A rough male voice filled the room. "Attention, Unit 001, containment phase failed, simulation reboot in 3, 2, Igor screamed, and everything went dark again. When he opened his eyes, he was back, in the lab, with Maria, in a lab coat, standing beside him, and the three men, the grown-up boys, standing, staring at him. Maria stepped closer, whispered in his ear, a solitary tear running down her cheek. "The next simulation will be worse." And then, the gas mask lowered onto his face. For the last time that night, Igor jolted awake. The gas mask was gone. The air felt heavy, dense, like he was breathing invisible smoke. His entire body tingled, fingers trembled. He looked around. The room was empty. No sign of Maria, no boys, no Roberto, no other Igor. Absolute silence. "Hello?" His voice came out hoarse. Suddenly, a screen on the wall lit up. An image. Maria. But it wasn't live. It was an old recording. She was smiling, lying on a grassy field. The boys, still small, ran in the background. Igor stepped closer, eyes burning. His hands trembled. A metallic voice filled the room. "Initiating Omega Protocol." The walls started shifting again. The images of Maria and the boys distorted, as if burning from the inside out. The floor trembled. "No, not again," Igor choked. From the ceiling, thick cables began descending like black serpents. They moved toward him. Igor tried to run, but the ground cracked beneath his feet. He fell hard, blood trickling from his forehead. As he tried to get up, he saw it. There, standing, in the middle of the room, was him. But not the lab coat Igor. It was a boy, around 12 years old. The same face as Igor, the same look. Who are you? Igor whispered. The boy smiled. A cold, emotionless smile. I'm you, he said, stepping forward. Before it all started. Igor gasped for air. His stomach turned. Memories began surfacing, fragmented. Broken toys, screams, a dark room, the sound of a door locking. The boy raised his hand, slowly opened his fingers. In his palm, a small metallic chip, the size of a coin. All of this, the boy said, eyes glassy but still wearing that frozen smile, was just a program to protect you. Protect me from what? Igor screamed. The boy stopped. His gaze changed, became empty, lifeless. From yourself. Before Igor could react, the boy pressed his own chest tightly. A blue flash exploded inside the room. The sound of metal tearing, alarms blaring, mixed voices. Everything turned to chaos. The ground started collapsing again, and as Igor fell into darkness for the last time, the only thing he could hear was Maria's voice, whispering deep in his mind. Igor, you were never real. And then, everything went black. Igor jolted awake. The floor still shook. The walls, cracked, hanging wires. The smell of burnt plastic filled the air. He coughed hard, tried to stand, but his head throbbed. Everything spun. Suddenly, a shrill alarm blared. Red lights flashed. Sirens. Metallic voices screamed codes he couldn't understand. Unit 001 collapsing, forced reconfiguration, the speaker voice shouted. He stumbled toward the door, pushed hard. Nothing. It was locked. He punched the wall in frustration. Maria! He screamed, his chest tearing apart. Silence. Until the screen next to the door turned on. A static-filled image, noisy, but slowly, it formed. It wasn't Maria. It was him, but different. His own face, but older. Gray hair, deep eye bags, a huge cut across his eyebrow. The man stared directly at the camera. If you're seeing this, it means the reset failed. The voice was hoarse, tired, but unmistakable. Higer froze. I'm you, the other continued. Just from the previous version. Igor's throat dried. His mind felt like it was about to explode. What does that mean? He whispered. The older Igor took a deep breath. All of this, the lab, Maria, the boys, the project, none of it is what you think. He paused. They're not testing you, Igor. You are the test. The ground shook harder. Sparks fell from the ceiling. You're the final cycle, the last of 1,000 failed versions. The older Igor glanced sideways, as if someone was coming. They don't want to erase you. They want you to accept. If you accept, you'll stop fighting and become one of them. Igor shouted, "This is insane!" The screen flickered. For a second, a list of files appeared. Folder names, all with dates. One stood out, Igor V999.mp4. This is your version number 999, Igor, the other said, voice breaking. And guess what? In the next one, you won't even remember your own name. The ground shook even harder. A bright flash filled the room. Before the image disappeared, the older Igor looked directly into the camera, eyes teary, and said one last thing. You need to find the original. The screen went dark. Igor collapsed to his knees, his heart pounding. His hands shook so much he could barely breathe. Original? What original? Who? Suddenly, behind him, the door unlocked with a sharp click. He turned, chest tight, and there, standing, with a huge cut across her face, covered in blood, was her, Maria. But not the usual Maria. This Maria wore the same black uniform as the project soldiers, and in her hands, she held a gun pointed straight at him. Get up, she said, her voice rough. Now. He froze. He could only stare at her. And the only question that came to his mind was, is she just another copy too? Maria took a step forward. Move it, Igor, she said, taking a deep breath. The next cycle has already started. Igor slowly raised his hands, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might explode inside his chest. Maria's stare, hard as stone, didn't waver, not a trace of the woman he knew. Maria, he whispered, his voice raw. If you're even still Maria. She took a breath, her fingers gripping the gun even tighter. For a second, her eyes flickered, but just for a second. Move, she repeated, colder than before. He took 2 steps forward, eyes filling with tears. He felt like the world around him could collapse again at any moment. Suddenly, the wall beside them exploded. Concrete flying, dust filling the air. A bright flash overwhelmed everything. Igor dropped to the ground instinctively. When he opened his eyes, 3 figures emerged from the smoke. The boys, grown. But now, without the uniforms, each with a red stripe painted across their cheeks, holding improvised weapons, iron pipes, knives, even a Molotov cocktail in one of their hands. Enzo led the way, eyes determined. "No one's controlling us anymore," he shouted. Maria spun around, surprised. "No, you're not supposed to be here." Before she could fire, Enzo hurled the Molotov at the room's control panel. Fire spread instantly. Alarms blared, sirens, emergency voices. Igor tried to get up, but it was Enzo who ran to him. "Come on, now!" Igor followed, stumbling. His body felt like it was failing with every step. But then, the twist hit him like a punch to the gut. Through the smoke, he saw her. Another Maria, with a bruised face, torn lab coat, running toward them, her eyes, the real eyes. "Igor, it's me," she shouted. Igor froze. The world spun. He looked back and saw the uniformed Maria, the one who had pointed the gun, giving a crooked smile. "I told you," she said before disappearing into the smoke. Igor staggered. No, this can't be. 2 Marias. One, running to save him. The other, vanishing into the chaos. Enzo pulled him again. "We don't have time. Come on." Igor ran with them, but his mind was shattered. The air burned. The fire consumed everything. And the question that hammered over and over in his mind as they ran down the burning corridor, which Maria was the real one? Igor ran with the boys through the burning hallways, his chest burning with fear and exhaustion. Maria, the real one, or at least the one he wanted to believe was real, was right behind him, yelling for him not to stop. The floor shook, the walls cracked. The sound of sirens and alarms came from everywhere. But what made Igor stop suddenly was the voice. A voice inside his head. "Stop now." He froze in the middle of the corridor. The kids crashed into him from behind. Maria stopped, panting, eyes wide. "What is it? Move." Igor held his head. The sound wasn't coming from a speaker. It wasn't external. It was inside, like a command, cold, irresistible. I can't," he murmured, trembling. Suddenly, all the lights went out. Total silence. For 3 seconds, only the sound of their breathing. Then, a burst of blue light flooded the hallway. The walls started to move, folding, bending like sheets of living metal. Maria screamed, "They've activated level 0. We have to get out of here now." Igor tried to run, but his body wouldn't obey. His legs stuck, like they were glued to the floor. Suddenly, the boys stopped too, all 3, at the same time. Eyes glazed, pupils dilated. Enzo spoke first. "The unit has failed." The second followed, voice identical. "Omega protocol will be completed." The third looked straight at Igor and said the sentence that froze his blood. "Your mission is over, Dad." Before he could react, the 3 of them stepped away in synchronized movements, turned, and disappeared into the smoke without looking back. "No!" Igor screamed, trying to chase after them. Maria grabbed his arm tightly. Don't! They're not them anymore. What? He shouted, desperate. She cried but didn't let go. They've been reprogrammed, Igor. From the beginning. They were the trap. The world spun. The floor felt like it was giving way. Everything he believed, everything he had fought for, crumbled. Suddenly, a new voice echoed. It wasn't his, nor Maria's. It was his mother's, but not just her. It was as if dozens of different voices spoke together, blended, deep, high, cold. Unit 001, prepare for total reset. Consciousness core extraction in 10, 9, 8. Maria yanked Igor hard, dragging him down the corridor. He tried to look back, but he couldn't see the boys anymore, only smoke. And that sound, the sound of his own mind, starting to shut down. When they reached an emergency door, Maria spun him around and pinned him against the wall. Listen, she said, eyes desperate. You need to know something, before it all ends. He blinked, sweating cold. She brought her mouth close to his ear and whispered, The real Maria died 2 years ago. Igor froze. The world went dark again. Igor barely had time to react. The floor beneath his feet shook like it would split open. His head spun. His heart raced in a rhythm that felt painful inside. What? He managed to whisper, looking at Maria like she had just ripped his entire world from its roots. What do you mean? Died? She took a deep breath. Her eyes, different, darker, lifeless. I'm the replacement, she said, in a nearly dead tone. I was created for this. Before Igor could ask anything, the wall behind him completely collapsed. A figure emerged from the smoke. His body froze. It was himself, but younger. Much younger. Around 20, clean-shaven, no scars. A Igor he barely recognized, but at the same time, one that felt more real than his current body. The young Igor smiled in a way that sent chills down his spine. I warned you, he said, walking slowly, eyes locked on the current Igor. You never existed, not like this. Maria stepped back 2 steps. Her hands trembled. She tried to aim the gun, but seemed powerless. No, not now, she murmured. The young Igor didn't care. He kept walking until he stood right in front of Igor. You know why you're stuck in this cycle, trying to save boys who were never yours? He tilted his head like an animal studying its prey. Because deep down, you're nobody's father. Igor's eyes widened. Shut up. But his voice came out weak. The other laughed. You're just the backup. And then, pointing to his own head, the safety copy they kept, in case the original broke. Igor stumbled back, stomach churning. Images started flashing through his mind. Surgeries, cables, screens with his face, a body floating in liquid, hundreds of versions of him, a room full of data storage tunnels, with his name on every door. Maria was crying now, real tears, streaming hard down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. You were never supposed to wake up. Before he could understand, the young Igor stepped forward and jabbed a syringe straight into his neck. The liquid burned like acid, his whole body locked up. His legs gave out. As his vision darkened, he still heard Maria's last words, kneeling beside him, her forehead pressed against his, her lips trembling. The real Igor died 3 years ago. And then, everything went black. But, before losing consciousness completely, a sound cut through the darkness. A baby's cry. Someone very close. Someone who felt real. And then, silence. The baby's cry still echoed in his mind, but when Igor opened his eyes, there was no baby. Just smoke, flashing lights, and the metallic taste of blood in his mouth. He tried to get up, but his body didn't respond. Every muscle ached like it had been crushed. His eyes burned. Breathing felt like inhaling shards of glass. Gradually, his vision cleared. He saw Maria, kneeling, her hand on her chest, struggling to breathe. The floor around her stained with red. But what made his heart stop completely was what stood behind her, the young Igor, standing, motionless. But something was wrong, very wrong. His face was cracking, literally, as if made of glass. Small fractures cutting through the skin, opening, exposing inside. Wires, circuits, tiny components. Igor's eyes widened. He tried to scream, but only a hoarse groan came out. Maria turned her head, saw it too, and could only whisper, "No, not now." The young Igor took a step forward, the sound of glass breaking. With every move, more pieces fell from his face, until half his head revealed what was underneath. It wasn't flesh or bone. It was metal, wires, chips, a single blue eye, glowing like an LED. "You never existed," he repeated, but now the voice had a mechanical tone, like it was pre-recorded. Igor was in shock, trembling. He tried to crawl, but all his strength was gone. Maria sobbed, choking back tears. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." The young Igor stopped, looked at her, and suddenly extended his hand, but not to help. From the palm of his hand, a blade emerged, long, silver, like a knife coming out from inside his own skin. Maria screamed. Igor tried to get up, but before he could do anything, a blast, an explosion, from the ceiling, dust, light, screams, and from the middle of the smoke, someone dropped down. Igor froze. It was himself, again, but this time, even older. Graying beard, deep dark circles under the eyes, torn clothes, blood at the corner of his mouth, one arm, replaced by a metallic prosthesis. The new Igor pulled out a stun weapon, and without hesitation, drove it straight into the young Igor's back. "Get away from her," he shouted. The young Igor's body locked up. The blade dropped to the floor. His system fried from the inside, sparks shooting from his eyes. Igor, the real Igor, could only stare, unable to understand anything anymore. The older Igor slowly turned, looked at the fallen Igor. "Get up," he said, voice hoarse, full of pain. "We don't have time." Igor blinked, confused. Who are you?" The other took a deep breath, pointed to himself. "I'm the last one left, and if we don't get out of here now, none of us will see the next cycle." Before Igor could react, the walls really started collapsing, and from the far end, dozens, maybe hundreds, of versions of himself emerged. All of them, running toward them. Igor ran with his chest tearing apart, his legs failing, the sound of his own footsteps mixing with the screams behind. The older Igor dragged him by the collar of his shirt. Maria stumbled just behind, her face stained with blood and desperation. The ground shook, lights flickered. The versions of him, all of them, charged toward them like a nightmare tidal wave. "Faster!" the older Igor yelled, shoving him forward. They burst through a side door, a narrow corridor with exposed cables and cracked walls. At the end, a light, the exit. But just as they were about to reach it, everything froze, literally. The air stopped, the lights froze mid-flicker, even the sound died. No screaming, no footsteps, no breathing. Igor looked around, confused, tried to move, but his body was locked, as if glued to the air. The older Igor was frozen too, one step in the air, mouth half open. Maria, wide-eyed, the tear on her cheek, suspended. Only one thing moved, a shadow, coming from the far end of the corridor. Slow, unhurried, a tall, thin, hooded figure. Igor tried to scream, but no sound came out. The shadow stopped 2 meters away from him, and then pulled back the hood. Igor's world collapsed. It wasn't Roberto. It wasn't Maria. It wasn't any of the Igors. It was him, the real one. Igor, with deep wrinkles, graying hair, but with the most alive, furious eyes he had ever seen in anyone. The original looked straight into his eyes, unblinking, unsmiling. "Finally found you," he said, voice low but so sharp it felt like it cut through the frozen air. Igor tried to speak, but his body still wouldn't respond. The original stepped closer, knelt, placed a hand on his face. "All this, all the copies, all the cycles, all because of you." He gripped Igor's jaw tight. "You are the defect, the glitch that should never have happened." And then, with his other hand, the original pulled something from his pocket. A small device. A controller. Igor froze. The original pressed the button. Immediately, Igor felt the world spin. His own body started to vanish, literally. His hands disappearing, his feet fading, as if being deleted, pixel by pixel. Before everything went dark, the original leaned in and whispered in his ear, "Goodbye, number 1000. And the world went dark. Igor felt his body disappearing, his feet turning to smoke, his hands fading like dust in the wind. The last thing he saw was the original's face, with that look of contempt that seemed to cut through to his bones. Then, darkness. But, suddenly, something tore through the dark. A crack, like glass shattering inside his head, and he opened his eyes. But he wasn't in the lab anymore, nor in the corridor, nor anywhere that made sense. He was in his childhood apartment, the same old couch, the same tube TV, the stained curtains, the smell of stale coffee in the air. Igor took a deep breath, heart racing. His hands trembled. No, this can't be. He took a step, tripped over a toy car, just like the one he had as a kid. He looked to the side, and the shock hit him. In the kitchen, his mother, alive, her back to him, making coffee, humming an old song softly. Igor moved closer, legs shaking. "Mom?" His voice came out as a choked whisper. She turned slowly, the smile, the same as always. But something was wrong. Her eyes were blue. They had always been brown. Igor stepped back, stomach twisting. What is this place?" She set the cup down in the sink, and the sound echoed like it was inside his head. "The last place where your mind still belongs to you," she said, but the voice, now it was Maria's. Igor froze. He blinked, and suddenly, his mother was gone, and there, standing in the kitchen, was Maria. Not the lab coat Maria, not the uniformed Maria, just a regular Maria. Messy hair, loose t-shirt, no makeup. She stepped forward, her eyes red from crying. "I hacked the system," she said, her voice shaking. "I only had one chance, so I created this, to pull you back." Igor stumbled. "What do you mean? Pull me back?" She stepped closer, pressed her forehead against his. "Because you're not a copy, Igor," she said, breathless. "You are the original." His world stopped. "You... what?" She squeezed her eyes shut, tears streaming down. "They erased your memory, put you in an endless cycle, made you believe you were just one more out of 1,000. But you weren't." Igor felt the ground vanish beneath him. I'm the..." Maria nodded. "The first. The one that went wrong. The one they could never replicate." Before he could react, the living room light flickered. The TV turned on by itself, and on the screen, his own face, the older Igor, looking desperate. "Maria, they found out. Take the simulation down now or they'll find him in there," he shouted. The floor shook. The window exploded. Outside, a swarm of soldiers stormed the apartment, black uniforms, helmets, guns raised. Maria screamed, "Wake up, Igor! Now!" He gasped for air, so hard it felt like it tore through his chest. And then, everything exploded into light. When he opened his eyes, he was on a gurney, with disconnected wires, surrounded by fallen bodies, and the lab entirely in ruins. And beside the bed, kneeling, crying, was the real Maria, with one detail. In her hand, the memory chip that controlled all his versions, broken in half. Iger coughed hard, spitting blood. His whole body trembled. His vision blurred. His head pounded like it was about to explode. The room, in pieces. Burnt cables, cracked ceiling, screams in the distance. Maria was there, the real one. Or at least, the one he wanted to believe was real. She shook, hands stained with blood, holding the broken chip in her palm. "It's over," she said, almost voiceless. Igor tried to laugh, a broken laugh. "No, it's not, is it?" She looked at him, eyes filled with tears. "No, not yet." Across the room, the lights flickered. Alarms blaring, all the screens, now blank. Only one symbol, a circle, with a single number flashing in the center. Igor felt a chill run down his spine. He tried to stand. His legs gave out. Maria ran over and grabbed him by the shoulders. "Get up!" she shouted, almost panicking. He took a deep breath, tasting metal in his mouth. "Where are they?" Maria bit her lip, her eyes full of pain. They crossed over. The system expelled the copies. She paused, panting. "It's just us left." Igor looked around. Scattered bodies, scorched cables, smoke rising. Suddenly, a different sound. A long, low siren, echoing from deep within the lab. Maria froze. Her gaze turned to ice. "What's that?" Igor asked, trying to steady himself against her. She hesitated, then swallowed hard. "It's the total elimination protocol. Everything will implode in 3 minutes." Igor's heart raced. "Is there a way out?" She nodded, motioning with her head toward an emergency door, half fallen, sparks flying from the side. "Just one, but we have to run, now." Igor summoned strength he didn't know he had, grabbed her hand. The two staggered forward, tripping over debris. Every step, a battle. As they neared the door, they heard metal grinding behind them. Igor turned to look. Through the smoke, one last figure, Roberto, or what was left of him. Half his face burned, one eye glowing red. He took a step, dragging one leg, and pointed an improvised weapon straight at them. "You won't leave here," he growled. Igor looked at Maria. She shook her head, panicked. "Go," she said. "I'll hold him off." Igor hesitated, but she shoved him hard. "Now, Igor, go!" Without thinking, he ran, burst through the door, his heart pounding so hard it felt like tearing through his chest. Behind him, he heard a shot. Then, a scream. "Maria!" The explosion followed, a white flash. The ground trembling, everything collapsing. Igor fell onto the asphalt, outside, coughing, covered in blood and dust. When he opened his eyes, all he saw were the lab's remains, turning to smoke. He fell to his knees, cried, screamed, and amidst the pain, one burning certainty remained. He was the original, and now he was alone. But before he could think of anything else, he heard crying, behind him, among the rubble, a small baby, wrapped in a blanket. Igor froze, crawled over to the child, picked them up, tears streaming down his face. Who are you?" he whispered. The baby opened their eyes. Blue, like his mother's. Igor held on tight, and at that moment, he knew the cycle might just be beginning. Now it's up to you. If you made it this far, you're one of us. You need to subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button. Now, let's get this video to reach more people. Flood the comments with your reactions, theories, breakdowns, everything running through your mind right now. And don't wait another second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this ending. Only the true fans understand the power of keeping this channel alive. Let's go together.